I'm Christy, the host of Giving Tree Surrogacy's podcast, From Bump to Bond. I am joined today by Jason Smith, the president of International Fertility Insurance, also known as IFI. Thank you so much for joining today to discuss insurance for the surrogacy journey and how to protect everyone involved. So thank you for joining, Jason.
My pleasure, Christy. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So before we dive into a lot of details about all of the different services that IFI provides, can you just kind of take us back to how you found your way to the fertility and surrogacy insurance platform? What made you stay? How did you even get here?
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes you're on like a plane or something and someone will say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And even if I were to tell them that I did insurance, I think I could give them 100 guesses and they would never guess that this is what I do.
Yeah.
And how I got into this is I've actually been doing insurance since 2007. And it was about 2014 that I was having a conversation with a friend of mine that was really struggling with fertility. And he and his wife had gone through multiple rounds of IVF without success. And we were just talking that night and I was just listening to his story. And he says, "Yeah, the next thing we're going to look to is surrogacy." And I said, interesting. At the time, I did a lot of life insurance in my practice. And I went home that night and I just had this sort of light bulb moment that I thought, "Yeah, I wonder if surrogates need life insurance." So the next day I started calling around to surrogate agencies and I thankfully built some connections with a handful of them. And I did that for about 3 years. And after that point, I was hearing from a lot of the surrogate agencies that I was working with that they weren't exactly thrilled with the options that they had in the marketplace, and that if I could help them with more insurance, that they would do it with me. So could you help me with maternity insurance? Could you help me with newborn insurance or egg donor insurance? And I couldn't do any of those in my existing role. So I started the work of creating this company and kind of never looked back. And it's just a lot more interesting than home insurance and auto insurance and so forth. So
Yeah.
I just kept going.
Yeah. And I think that is something that is a typical response to a lot of people in this industry, whether attorneys, an intake coordinator at an agency, insurance, that someone has a personal connection that brought them to the industry. And that's what I love about this industry in particular, that it's just so personal and passionate, no matter what space you're even talking about. So yeah, what would you say surprised you most when you first entered into this space?
Yeah. Well, when I was starting the company, I just was scratching the surface of what are the risks that we need to protect. And I was just so surprised how many different details there are and how many different aspects of potential coverage options existed, and just all the steps that intended parents and their surrogate go through to get from just starting to talk about it to eventually having a baby. There's just so much involved, and then I also would say it was a lot more expensive than I thought it would be. Not just the insurance aspect of it, but just the process in general through IVF and finding a surrogate and working with a surrogate agency and then of course the insurance to help with some of these coverages. So yeah, just so many details, so many steps,
Mhm.
and a bit more expensive than I thought it was.
Yeah. Would you say that maybe the cost is one of the biggest misunderstandings about insurance in the beginning, or are there other misunderstandings that you feel like intended parents have in the first steps of their process?
Yeah, we talk to folks that are working with an agency, and we also talk to a lot of independent intended parents that are
Mhm.
trying to do this on their own. And I think that the biggest misunderstanding is that everyone will be covered and that I can just move ahead and get, go through IVF and start towards getting pregnant, and then I'll figure it out down the road.
Mhm.
Um, and that's just simply not the case. Even what would seem to be qualified surrogates that are working with surrogate agencies that have been screened, some of them have a great history where they've delivered three babies, for example, and seem like a great candidate. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they will qualify for every type of insurance that we offer. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big misunderstanding. I'm really sad whenever somebody reaches out to us and they said, yeah, my surrogate is 12 weeks pregnant. We need to talk to you about insurance now. And it's always this big, kind of cross my fingers and hope that they're actually going to be able to get the insurance that they're hoping that they're going to get. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's definitely the biggest one, is people thinking that everyone will qualify for everything and there's no timeline that's important.
And often at agencies, I think we hear that insurance is kind of the most intimidating part, or maybe the most daunting piece of a surrogacy journey. Why do you think that that is?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say there's a lot of people that feel like they have a good grip on insurance, a good understanding of insurance, and they think that, well, I understand my home insurance very well. I understand my
Right.
auto insurance very well. Maybe I have life insurance myself. I understand how that works. Um, and I think that this is all very different. Thankfully, we've built some products that are very surrogacy friendly, and some of them are very easy to order. But there's others that are less easy to order. And just, I think that people just think that it's going to be very simple when in reality, this is specialized insurance that's been built for surrogacy, which is a very special area of the world. It's not the day to day. And so I think that we can make it easy to talk about. We have a nice insurance guide that is easy, that we try to make it simple enough that somebody can read it, that English isn't their first language even. And we have nice, easy descriptions and price ranges and so forth. But I think people just need to be aware that it's not as simple as what I would consider normal insurance, your home insurance, your auto insurance, so forth.
Mhm. Yeah. What are the biggest risks that families don't realize they're carrying if they don't have the right coverage? Because, like you mentioned, there are different types that are offered, and every situation needs to be evaluated on a case by case.
Yeah, so I would say one of the greatest things and one of the worst things about this business is that there are a lot of Facebook groups that people join and they attend and they speak with people that either have already gone through or are going through their same circumstance. So there's Facebook groups for surrogates, Facebook groups for intended parents. But what existed 5 years ago is not the same as what exists today. And so I
Mhm.
think, unfortunately, people get into these groups and they say, what do I need to do about newborn insurance, for example? Is this important or so forth? And they get bad information because they're taking advice from somebody that went through surrogacy 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, it was very, very easy to get different types of insurance that are not necessarily hard to get, but just different to get today.
Mhm.
So I think that there's some misunderstandings of that if somebody told them that they can do this or that in a Facebook group, that it's just easy to do. And
Mhm.
I think probably the two biggest ones again that are the biggest potential risks are not getting newborn insurance if you're an
Mhm.
international, meaning not from the United States, but having a baby in the United States, let's say. Um, the second one would be again, somebody getting uh, into a pregnancy without maternity coverage for their surrogate. There's some other ones that are important and the timing does matter and so forth, like our bed rest insurance that covers lost wages, childcare, and housekeeping if a surrogate goes on bed rest, or our miscarriage coverage. These are big risks that are important to get. But I think the biggest one is the newborn insurance, because if you don't get it, it could be potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars that an intended parent could have to cover, as opposed to paying a fraction of that cost to cover it with insurance.
And it's something too that, if I'm not mistaken, has to be put in place prior to a confirmation of pregnancy. Is that right with the timing of something like that?
Well,
Is it?
I would say that the maternity insurance is typically ordered at or before confirmation of pregnancy and usually will start at the confirmation of pregnancy. The newborn insurance is probably the product area that evolves more than anything else. I've been doing this for many years now, and I've seen, I don't know, 10 different potential options come and go. So I would say, like, we're talking today in January of 2026, right this minute. I would say that one of the products that we offer needs to be in place 1 month before the transfer, and the other two can be anywhere from about confirmation of pregnancy through, let's say, 16, 15, 16 weeks into the pregnancy. But some of the features of them, if you want, for example, split embryo coverage, you would need to get them before confirmation, before the transfer. So you're right that I think the safest idea is to plan that you should get this in place before the transfer.
With IFI's mission, IFI says its mission is to empower intended parents. What does empowerment actually look like in practice?
Thanks. Yeah. I'm proud of this. This is really like we have a handful of values that we try to live by, and education is the second one.
Mhm.
And not that it's the second most important, but we really try to be the leader in this market in education. We do typically we've been working on it right now. We have essentially one webinar each week, give or take, and sometimes a year, even twice a week. So we have webinar events that are educational events for either the industry or for intended parents to join. We also do consultations that we're happy to sit with intended parents for as long as they need to get educated, and understand, ask questions. We're happy to provide them policy documents so they can review them. We're happy to explain the highlights of each policy. And we have a nice insurance guide that I think I've mentioned already, but it makes it, we're happy to give that out ahead of a consultation to give them sort of some pre-meeting reading to get a
Mhm.
basic understanding of what we're talking about. And then again, happy to have a consultation to help them educate further. So it's really, we can't stress it enough. We joke that there's unlimited questions, and there really are a lot of questions you should ask. So I think it's important. I think in this world, we too often are using, DocuSign and other things to sign our documents when we're going through 60 pages of materials and not looking at it. And not that I would say that you should read every line of every policy that we offer, but please do ask questions. We want you to feel really informed before you make your decisions.
Yeah, and I think it's so important too to have different avenues of the way that people are receiving the information because it is complex. Not everyone pursuing surrogacy is an expert when it comes to insurance or any of this information. And so it may take someone hearing, attending a webinar and then referring to the brochure, hearing this podcast, just different ways that they're taking the information in and then hopefully coming up with questions to bring to consults. And so it can be a long process to truly feel comfortable and the place where someone would feel empowered to move forward. What does peace of mind really mean when you're talking about surrogacy insurance?
So I think that that means that it's not one size fits all. It's you and I, Christy, we could be intended parents and be going through the same exact process of trying to have a baby, but your financial needs might be entirely different than mine, and you may have abundance of funds, and I might be just scrapping to make this happen. And I think we really try to to custom fit the needs, not say we only have these three options and which bucket do you fit into.
Mhm.
We want you to feel confident that you're covering the aspects of this that are most important to you. Some of the things are, some people can afford $20,000 and it's not going to make a big impact to them. And there's things that they should potentially self insure. And there's others that 20,000 would be a massive amount to them. And they'd be a better fit to spend $1,000 or $1,500 instead of risking having to spend $20,000. So it's one size, it's not one size fits all. And I think we just want to provide this education, do these consultations until you can feel peaceful going into your journey, that the risks that you were worried about, you don't need to worry about.
Mhm. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about specifically the surrogate protections, life insurance, disability, and bed rest. I know you've kind of mentioned those items earlier. So what products does IFI offer when it comes to specifically the surrogate protections?
Yeah. So let's go through the ones that you just mentioned. And I think another one would probably be, well, the other ones that come into play, I don't know if we want to cover it in this minute or not, but would be surrogate maternity coverage and surrogate IVF complications as well.
Mm,
But I'll
okay.
just kind of go through each one real quickly and say, this is what it is. This is what it covers. And again, we have a real nice insurance guide. You can write us uh, and just ask for it, or ask from your agency um, for our insurance guide, and it'll provide the same kind of education. But life insurance is, I'd say, the two areas that are really like mandatory are life insurance and maternity coverage. I can't ever recall any surrogate pregnancy that those two things weren't in place. So
Mhm.
the life insurance is a special coverage that we offer a couple different ways, but the way that most use it, it's it's a specialized coverage that's been built for surrogacy. And the thing is, the surrogate's doing this wonderful thing for the intended parents. And while it's a very small risk, she is putting herself at risk of passing away through a medical complication.
Right.
And if that were to happen, the least that we want to do is be able to provide some money to her family so that they can live out, at least financially, the dreams that they had planned on. So, so life insurance is that. Uh, Disability insurance. So disability and bed rest are kind of the same term. A disability policy for a non-surrogate is really something that covers your lost wages were you to have an injury that keeps you out of work. What we're talking about here is bed rest insurance, is what we call it. That is there to cover if a surrogate has an injury, if you will, a complication that puts her either in the hospital or on bed rest, uh, physician ordered bed rest due to a complication. And in just about every surrogacy contract, there is language that says that the intended parents are responsible for her lost wages, her child care, and her housekeeping if she's unable to work. And if she's, even if she's a stay at home mom, then she still would have the childcare and the housekeeping needs, even if she doesn't have income that's coming in on a regular basis. So this bed rest insurance can be there to cover if something happens that she's hospitalized or put on bed rest for an extended period of time. That instead of the intended parents having to cover this, let's say she goes on bed rest at week 20, and maybe she's on bed rest for 16 weeks or or something, 18 weeks until the delivery, we have a policy that can, instead of the intended parents having to cover, say, $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 per week to cover her wages, her childcare, her housekeeping, this policy can do it for them for a very small portion of what it would have cost them.
Yeah.
We have another policy that can pair with it that's called a hospital indemnity policy that just adds a little bit of extra money to this as well to even further reduce the needs for the intended parents to cover. And then again, the other ones that you didn't mention, but I'll just throw them in. Maybe we'll come back to them later on. But surrogate IVF complications insurance is there to cover complications of IVF, so that the intended parents don't have to pay for the emergency room or hospitalization if there's a complication of IVF. And then maternity coverage is the other one that I would say is mandatory, generally speaking. I can't recall ever seeing a pregnancy that there wasn't some coverage to cover the medical expenses and the complications of pregnancy. So rather than the intended parents having to cover what could be a $20,000 bill or a $200,000 bill, there's insurance that can cover that.
Yeah. And so basically, for the intended parents, those plans reduce financial risk for them, and for the surrogate to replace income or childcare, housekeeping, any kind of cost associated with that bed rest, to protect her and her family in that way financially.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the IVF complications, not as common, but when a surrogate is going through the IVF process, there can be some complications. We've referred to like bleeding or medication reactions, something that might lead to an ER visit or a hospitalization in extreme cases. And so, like you referred to, those costs can be a few $1,000s or more. More severe cases could be tens of thousands of dollars. So those things are put in place again before she begins the IVF process. Is there a point where it's too late for them to get that coverage?
Yeah. So there's a lot of policies that we offer that sort of have a suggested timeline, but you could arguably buy them later as long as there aren't complications thus far. And similarly, you'd want to get this at the start of medication that is prior to the IVF transfer.
Mm-hmm.
The You could arguably get it a week before the transfer, but you're going to get the same. It's going to cost exactly the same if you buy it a month before the transfer or a week before the transfer. So, or even after the transfer, hypothetically, you could probably still buy it, and it would cover from that point on until she is handed off to the obstetrician with a confirmation of pregnancy. But the better idea is to buy this before she starts medication. And we actually even have the ability to start this even earlier now to cover the screening process as well.
Okay.
So we now have some people that will buy an even longer policy to cover you can cover just screening or just IVF or both of them with this policy.
That's great to know. Yeah. Going back to the maternity insurance, and I kind of have this lumped together with billing management that
Sure.
IFI can provide. So the maternity coverage in and of itself is one of the biggest line items in surrogacy. What are families most shocked to learn about maternity insurance?
Yeah, I may have made a reference to this before, but I think the big surprise is that not everyone qualifies.
It's worth saying
Almost,
twice, at
almost,
least.
almost everybody qualifies,
Yeah.
and there is what we call ACA or Affordable Care Act, normal U.S. health insurance, and everybody qualifies for that. But it's number one, only a limited window. It's typically 2 months, and
Mhm.
going into 2027, it may be even less time, we're told. But it's typically just something that happens in the sort of November, December timeframe for a January 1st start. So if you're, and currently a February 1st start, but we think that's going away. Um, so there are ways to get something for essentially everyone, but that the piece to that that's becoming harder and harder through the years is that not everyone, even if you have a plan that will cover surrogacy, it won't necessarily work with the doctor and the hospital that you'd like to use. So
Yeah.
the provider networks are ever changing. And so I think a lot of people just have this misunderstanding that everyone will be able to find some sort of coverage for the surrogate. And I'd say that's mildly true if you don't care at all about who your doctor is or who the hospital is. There's probably something in most cases, but
Hmm.
but you usually do care about the doctor and the level of care and the hospital and the level of the intensive care unit at your hospital. And so it's important that it's just really important that you look into these things far in advance. And we would suggest like medical clearance is a good time to be having this discussion, because that way we've got a surrogate that we know has qualified medically to be capable to be your surrogate. She's probably gone through the legal process as well at that point. So you're feeling good. You've got a real agreement here, a real likelihood that this can be our surrogate. Um, and then let's work through getting clear on which coverage will make sense. Is it this ACA that I just mentioned? Is it a private specialized plan? We have different ways of doing this, but it's just, let's get all of that squared away and clear so that you can then comfortably move towards an IVF transfer, knowing that there is going to be some kind of insurance that's available. So that's number one. And then I would also say, I mentioned this ACA, the Affordable Care Act, normal U.S. health insurance. I think, again, when we talk about those Facebook groups, you used to be able to get this insurance for, I mean, when it first came out, I think it was, a couple $100s a month.
Hmm.
This year, we're seeing a lot of cases. This is 2026 as we're recording this. This year, we're seeing a lot of cases that are more than $1,000 per month for the same exact policy. And so I think people are surprised at the cost and how challenging it is to use these ACA policies.
Hmm.
Um, the other thing is just the complexity of the billing. So you mentioned sort of pairing the maternity insurance with the fact that we do maternity medical billing management.
Hmm.
Um, it's just so complex. I've had two pregnancies myself, and I can just tell you, it's if you've never been through a big medical need yourself, you'll be really surprised at how complex the medical billing is.
Hmm. What would you say the biggest reason why professional billing management is so important during and after delivery?
Yeah, so it's not just after delivery. I mean, when we do it, we start at confirmation of pregnancy. We go from that point all the way through the delivery and then all the postpartum. But I can just tell you from my own personal experience, I remember I remember the first pregnancy most specifically because I was so overwhelmed. And I had this island in the middle of my kitchen, and I had these medical bills just piling in through the mail. And this was before, I think many of them might be more emailed these days, but um, many years ago it was just stacks. It still is, I think, stacks of medical of letters coming with these medical bills. And I was just so overwhelmed by the pregnancy itself. And you talked about postpartum. The delivery had happened, and these bills just keep coming in while I've got this newborn baby, and I just don't have time to look at these. And so I was just putting them on the island, and it started as a couple bills, and it just kept stacking and stacking and stacking to the point where
Hmm.
the pile was falling over. And I finally get around to looking through these bills, and I'm just perplexed, confused. There is the same bill that is one number, and then I'm looking at the same exact thing, and it's a different number.
Hmm.
And why is this? And I can tell you now that I work in the industry, it's because the first one was sort of your first bill, And the second one was, now that they've applied some sort of insurance, here's the new total.
Mhm.
But the part of this that makes our medical billing management so important is that I'm not a trained I'm slightly more trained now, but back then I was definitely not a trained professional. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at these bills and I don't have a clue what this code means, or why are there three doctors listed on this bill? What are these drugs? It's just foreign to someone that doesn't understand it. It's just like reading a different language.
Mhm.
And so, long story short, what we do is we help simplify that. We take control of all the bills for the whole pregnancy, the delivery, and into the postpartum, until we get to the point where every bill has been analyzed for accuracy. That if there is something to argue, if there's an error, that we do the arguing for you, that we get it corrected, and then we get it paid. And we do that all the way until we get to the point where we have zero balances with all the providers.
I think that's something that provides so much peace of mind. I think it seems like something that's not talked about as much, but the impact of just that piece of medical billing management, for me personally, I just think that that is so valuable, because, like you said, usually when you have a newborn, um, and if there are complications, even without complications, it's new, it's exhausting, and not typically something that someone looks at these bills. They know exactly what to look for, what could have been a mistake. And then I think the tactic of mailing so that you physically see the bills piling up is probably intentional
Yeah.
and can just be so overwhelming. So I just love that you offer that, because I really think that that is such a valuable, um,
Yeah,
totally
and
worth the
it's
money if
it's it's
possible.
growing in popularity. Every year for the last several years, I'd say we've been growing probably 25% a year in terms of our caseload. And I think right now in January of 2026 we have about 1,200 cases under management right now. So it's active cases right this minute, um, and we're adding more medical billing specialists because of we see the continued growth. So it is becoming more known. More agencies are involving it and promoting it to their clients, and so it's becoming more known. But
Yeah,
it's
that's
it still has a
fantastic.
ways to go.
Yeah. What kinds of billing mistakes or even overcharges do you or the team typically catch?
Yeah, so we actually track it, and we find that about 8 out of every 10 cases, there are some sort of errors. So
Wow.
20% of the time, it would have been a at least financially a waste to hire us. But 80% of the time, we probably actually saved you money.
Hmm.
And the reason is that I'd say we find all of the following. We find excessive charges, and we've done so many cases that we we can see that this doctor is charging this much for this thing, that somebody in the same exact town is charging 30% less. And
Hmm.
so we'll argue excessive charges when we see them. And sometimes we're successful. We see network issues. So the concept of network means that if a provider, if a doctor, if a hospital is in network with an insurance company, it means that they've negotiated a special rate, a discounted rate that is supposed to be applied to all of their cases. And so we see there's what's called in network, and then there's out of network. And in network means it gets the discount, out of network typically means it's double the cost. And then there are some providers that just won't even take the plan. But there's in network and out of network. And a lot of times we'll see what should be in network billed as out of network. Or we see providers changing from in network to out of network in the middle of a pregnancy. And we have a case study of some savings where I can't remember the exact number, but about $4,800 was saved in one of our cases when in the middle of the pregnancy the provider decided to leave the network and they wanted to charge now the out of network. And we argued on behalf of these intended parents and got the provider to honor their original rates. And it's not a guarantee that we can do that in every case, but it did save about $4,800 on that specific case. So we see excessive charges, we see network issues, we see duplicate bills. Um,
Mm.
and again, if you're not, if you don't have this service, what will usually happen is the bill will come from the surrogate. It'll go to the surrogate agency. The surrogate agency, if there's not this medical billing set up, will then just pass it on to the escrow company where your intended parent funds are being held, and the escrow company will just pay the bill. That's their job. Is you send us this bill, we pay the bill. And so nobody in this process is actually looking to see is this accurate or not. So we see coding errors where something is improperly coded, and because of that, a different amount is charged than really should be because they're billing for, you know, some different service that's not even pregnancy related,
Hmm.
and it should be something about a pregnancy. So yeah, duplicate bills, and again, if those aren't caught, the bill one will go to the escrow company, it'll get paid. Bill two, that's the same exact thing. Like I said in my own example, I get the first one, then I get the second one. If I just passed both of those off to escrow, they both would get paid.
Hmm.
So those are just a few of the things that we see.
Wow. For newborn insurance that's hopefully something that, clients don't really have to use or need. But why is it so important to have in place?
Yeah, so it's a good point you say. They hopefully won't need it, and I think we see that just a low percentage. I want to say it's about 4% of the time the baby comes early and is in the intensive care unit, which is often called the NICU, the newborn intensive care unit or neonatal intensive care unit. So it doesn't happen that frequently with singleton pregnancies. It happens quite a bit with multiple embryo.
Hmm.
But with a singleton pregnancy, which is what most of the cases are, um, it's a rarity. But when it happens, it could be about $10,000 or more U.S. dollars per day that the baby's in that intensive care unit. If the baby comes on time, you could argue that it would be okay to not have newborn insurance. The bill's going to be somewhere in the range of probably $3,000 to $10,000. We call that well baby care. So you're not buying newborn insurance for the well baby care. You're buying it for the NICU, the intensive care unit. And if your baby comes early, it might very well come a month early or 2 months early, even. And that could be, for example, 30 or 60 days times $10,000 or even more per day. So you can see where that could be a really large bill if you
Right.
don't have insurance for it.
Yeah. And just to clarify, all newborn costs are not included, even if your surrogate's insurance was approved to use for her surrogacy journey, or if she has other coverage in place. This is a separate cost entirely from the maternity care, correct?
Correct. There's typically what's called a pre-birth order. And a pre-birth order means that there's a legal agreement that says when this baby is born, it's done pre-birth, before the birth. When this baby is born, it becomes the possession and the family of this or these intended parents. So the surrogate's insurance continues to cover her medical needs while she sits in the hospital recovering, but the baby is not part of the surrogate. It's your baby, um, and so yeah, the surrogate's maternity insurance typically will cover up to the delivery, including the delivery and postpartum for her. The newborn insurance starts to kick in once this baby's born because it's now the family of the intended parents.
And so typically, if you are an international intended parent or parents, newborn would be more beneficial for you But that being said, US based intended parents need to check their own insurance coverage to see if they are able to add the newborn onto their policy once the baby is born. So there may still be some US clients that you have that intended parents need that service too.
Yeah, it's more that they need to be aware of it and make changes to their policy before the birth. So with a intended parent from Spain or China or someplace other than the US and they're coming here, their insurance, generally speaking, is not going to cover anything. It might cover their own personal travel, for example, but and if something happens to them, but generally speaking, your own personal insurance from another country doesn't typically cover a baby being born in the US.
Yeah.
But typically, if you're a US citizen, uh, your insurance should cover the baby. And but it's a bit of a surprise area where some agencies don't do a good job of telling the intended parents that they should double check this. So I don't want to get in the weeds of the different types of policies, but there are some policies that are very local in coverage, and there are others that are nationwide in coverage. And the more local ones, we do see it where somebody is from one state, but their surrogate is from another state, and they just wrongfully make the assumption that they're going to have coverage to cover this baby born in this other state, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't. A lot of times they do. So, all they need to do is just turn their card over, call the number on the back, and say, "Hey, I'm planning to have a baby through surrogacy." There's surrogacy shouldn't matter in this equation, but might as well just tell them so there's no surprises. Plan to have a baby through surrogacy in San Diego, California. Do I have coverage at this
Mm-hmm.
hospital? Because it'd be a horrible surprise to find out that you don't. And if you find out that you don't have coverage there, then it may be possible for you to change your own insurance at the next open enrollment period, either for your company or just buying that Affordable Care Act policy for yourself, a different version of it, one that does cover nationwide. So generally speaking, it's not so much they need to buy newborn insurance from us as much as they need to make an adjustment to their insurance before the baby arrives.
Okay. And you offer the newborn billing management the same way that you would for the maternity bill.
We do, yeah. So we have three insurance policies currently in January of 2026 for newborn insurance, and two of them are newborn insurance. Our newborn billing management would be a helpful tool. One of them it's actually included. One of them One of them doesn't cover well baby care. And so it's a good idea to pair our billing management to help reduce the cost of the well baby care. The third one has a different provider that is included that provides newborn billing management as part of that service. So one way or another, it's a good idea, but you can also theoretically just choose not to buy newborn insurance, and we will engage and connect with the doctor in the hospital and work to reduce the bills. It's not insurance, but it's us reducing the bills and managing the process.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And kind of switching to who you are in contact with on a day-to-day basis. IFI is working closely with agencies, attorneys, clinics, intended parents directly if it's potentially an independent journey. Why is collaboration so critical in this space and communicating with all those parties?
Yeah, so last year was actually the first year that we really went aggressively down the path of trying to have these sort of scheduled check-ins with some of our partners, our referral partners, the agencies, the attorneys, the clinics. We always would do it sort of as it happened, reactive. Would you like to get together, so forth. But we actually go out of our way to schedule check-ins because it's important that we understand the direction that agency is looking to go towards. What are the things that they maybe include in their program naturally? What are the things that they leave to the intended parents to choose? So that way we can have good discussions with the intended parents and number one, maybe not talk about things that are already being covered already by that agency. So we don't waste anybody's time. If you're already getting it, why should we talk about it?
Yeah.
But yeah, just trying to really understand the goals of that agency, and then try to tailor our conversations with the intended parents around um, kind of mutual agreement on the direction that agency is trying to go towards.
Mhm.
Um, using medical billing management as an example, some agencies require it or mandate it, make it part of their program. Others strongly suggest it. So understanding that helps us to just go in the right direction of carrying out the vision of how this agency hopes to provide protection for their clients. Um, and it's also a matter of we do this we do this sort of listening to intended parents and listening to the agency partners to as part of our one of the four things that we work on as our values. One of them is innovation, and we really want to be the leader in bringing new products and services to the market that are helpful to intended parents. We try to do that a couple times a year, but we get those ideas from those conversations. So, we have regular discussions internally of what are our team that does the consultations with the intended parents. What are they hearing? What are the recurring themes that intended parents are asking for? And similarly, on the agency side, the agencies might be hearing things that are important to the intended parents, and we like to say, "Hey, is there anything that we don't do now that you think would be helpful?" And then
Mhm.
we'll work towards evolving our suite of products and services to offer those things.
Yeah, it's constant evolving and innovation. Those are definitely standout words for me in this industry. Is just, we can talk about how even in a support type role as an agency for a journey of how a journey should go, and this is a perfect scenario for this journey to roll out, and then life happens and there are a lot of things that end up coming up, and we often say, um, this is a first. It's an interesting industry because you can learn trends, and I've been in the industry in some capacity for over 10 years now, and I still feel like I'm constantly learning. It's changing rapidly, even just with laws and insurance ACA plans, and that all looks different. Like you said, January 2026, this is the conversation, but what will the conversation look like next year?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're just constantly learning and growing. And that's something I love about this industry so much too.
Yeah, and actually, as I think on this a little bit more, the other thing is just, and we're this year we're going to try to sort of blast out on a maybe quarterly basis some best practices, just in text, but also in the educational events we do. But I think just making sure that the agencies also understand the timing, just like we're encouraging intended parents to get these things at specific times. There are some really great agencies that really have good awareness of these things, and then there are others that are maybe smaller in nature, that are or newer to the business or so forth, that similar to intended parents make wrongful assumptions. And so
Mhm.
we're just trying to educate people so that there's not surprises. Yeah.
Yeah. And the the partnership between IFI and agencies, that's when it comes down to the timing of things, that everyone is submitting things timely, preparing, making sure that everyone is educated ahead of time. You don't want to be too far down the road and then questions come up of, why didn't we think of this, or why didn't we know about this ahead of time. So um, yeah, timing is incredibly important, and that communication and partnership between agencies and IFI. Um, and how do you feel like that specifically benefits the surrogates and intended parents in that collaboration?
Yeah. I just think that it's, I'd say probably number one, it's stress reduction. So if I can just think of a case right now where there's an agency that intended parents are emailing us on the side, and they're saying they're not real happy with how it's going, and thank you for all the extra work that we're doing and so forth. But it's just trying to you can tell that this set of intended parents that I'm talking about, they're frustrated, they're stressed out. It's just not going the way that it should. And I think what we're trying to do is just reduce that stress through constant education
Yeah.
and reduce the stress to the intended parents, but maybe even more importantly to the surrogate. The last thing you want is a stressed out surrogate, because it really, her stress level can impact the pregnancy. And
Right.
so we want to keep it as simple as possible for the intended parents and for the surrogate, so they can be at peace. And we want to, like with the medical billing management, for example, that takes a big stress load off of the agency as well, so that they can then focus on keeping the intended parents and the surrogate happy, have great communication and so forth. So we're just
Mhm.
trying to educate to avoid surprises and reduce stress, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. From your perspective, how is the fertility and surrogacy insurance landscape changing? I know you kind of touched on that with the ACA changes. Anything else that you feel like you haven't touched on that should be mentioned?
Yeah, I think already the ACA has changed a lot. I've been doing this a long time, and the policies, the ACA came out 10 years ago. The 10 years just expired, and the cost of the plans is different, but
Hmm.
the ease of using the plans is also different. So ACA is changing, and just I would say the cost of everything in the world seems to be, or at least America, everything seems to be more expensive, from milk to gas to pregnancy. And the as everything goes up in cost, everybody seems to need to be paid more. So as doctors and hospitals need to be paid more, and nurses, and you know insurance companies, and drug providers, everyone is charging more for everything. So just the cost of the whole process is going up,
Yeah.
which impacts the ACA policies. Now their premiums need to be higher, but also impacts even the private policies, because if the pregnancy once cost 10,000, but now it costs 15,000, then of course the plan needs to be more expensive to accommodate for that. Surrogate compensations are rising quite a bit, and that just impacts the cost of this whole thing for the intended parents.
Hmm.
We are seeing, I guess, one positive is we're seeing more employers willing to help. We see some employers not covering surrogacy, and that's bad. But we also see some employers uh, providing different types of plans that maybe give a $30,000 lump sum benefit to cover surrogacy and egg donation, for example, or the cost of IVF, or this or that. So there are some positives, and
Hmm.
then even on the continuing on to talk about IVF, there are some state initiatives um, where IVF itself uh, is perhaps a covered cost for. This doesn't really help international intended parents, but for domestic intended parents, your large group employer plans, we are seeing more of them covering IVF, which even which can help reduce that one piece of the puzzle. Uh,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
and not just for those that are infertile. It's we're starting to see it, for all sorts of different scenarios.
Yeah. We will take any positive changes that we can in this space
Yeah.
with IVF coverage. Any coverage helps. So that's one positive for sure. What should intended parents be more proactive about today than in the past? Are there things that they should really be focused on when they get started on this?
Yeah, I mean, we some of them we've already talked about, but getting the maternity care, getting an awareness that your surrogate is going to qualify. There are great surrogates that agencies and IVF doctors will be thrilled to work with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the insurance company will.
Yeah.
So understanding what will it take for my surrogate to qualify, and based on that, does it need to be an ACA policy where everyone qualifies? And if so, does the doctor and hospital that I'd like to use, will they work with these plans historically? And then I think it's it's really changed in terms of double embryo transfers. I think that um, 5 years ago, again, I keep referencing that, but these Facebook groups, their friend will tell them, "Oh yeah, sure, no, yeah, we did a double embryo transfer. It was
Yeah.
fine." And I'd say there's less and less IVF doctors willing to do double embryo transfers because of the increased risks. Um, and there's no good insurance that covers twins these days. Again, that might change through the years. We're talking about this in January of 2026, but years ago we had a variety of twin newborn insurance. We don't have those now, so just awareness of that. Um, yeah, just I think the two big ones to make sure that you have good coverage are the maternity and the newborn, and just having those discussions in advance so you're not surprised when you're already deep into your journey and now you realize you can't get those coverages.
Yeah. Yeah. For intended parents listening who feel overwhelmed right now, I know that you have talked about your insurance guide. It's very easy to understand, it's very digestible. Anyone can write to info@goifi.com to request a copy of that, or ask your agency if you're working with a surrogacy agency. I know you referenced the consultations to educate or answer questions, um, referencing the guide for that. Is there anything else that you would recommend someone to do to prep for a consultation, or just
Yeah,
go
I
into
think it's
it with
I
any?
think it's a great idea to look at our insurance guide. It's got everything that we talked about and then some, but it's very easy to read. I think it's 3 or 4. It might be 7 pages long, but that includes like a cover page and a back page, and just a couple, a page or so about our company. But I think it's like 3 or 4 pages long of each topic that we talked about today, a basic explanation of what it is, a price range, the lowest it could cost, the highest it could cost, and the most common price that we see. So just going through that will really start to educate you, and then that way you can ask questions that really relate to your specific needs. And we're happy to talk to people as early as they like. They don't have to even be matched with an agency. And then we can talk to them briefly, and then 6 months later talk to them again. It's no problem.
I think we hear that too, at Giving Tree. I'm sure other agencies hear that as well in consultations, that people just don't know when to reach out. Is it too early on in the process? Do they not know enough? They feel like they need to be fully versed on everything. And I think we just want to dispel that there's not a time that is too early. If you're just in the early research phase, you don't even know if you will need to go down the surrogacy path. I think just, as we focused on this episode today, education is so important, to see what people truly need, at the end of the day, that they feel most comfortable with. So as we wrap up, if you find yourself listening to this and thinking about surrogacy and you're at the stage of exploring agencies, Giving Tree is always happy to offer consultations, answer questions, IFI as well, and whether you're starting out or comparing options. And I think, one last thing that I'll say, as Jason shared, IFI works with many agencies across the industry. So no matter who you choose, having the right education and insurance support early on is key. So
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again for joining today and sharing such valuable and crucial information. I think it's just so important to get out there. And so thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
All right, my pleasure. Anytime.
Thank you.
Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might find it just as thought-provoking.